Hello, and welcome to the weekly podcast from the Huffines Institute for Sports Medicine and Human Performance. I'm your host, Dr. Tim Lightfoot, the director of the Huffines Institute, and I'm so glad that you took the time to download us, or you're watching us, watching us, because we have another interesting person from the world of sports medicine and human performance with us. We're going to break our pandemic cycle that we've had for the last year, and we're going to actually have a conversation with someone in the sports physiology world that has been affected certainly by COVID, but doesn't have anything directly to do with COVID. But I think you'll enjoy hearing this guest and seeing this guest because this is, if you've been a longtime listener of the podcast, this is a person that you heard many years ago who started out as a producer for us, worked her way up and graduated and went on to do great things in the world. And we're so excited to have her back on the podcast with where she started many years ago. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Miss Kelli Selman back to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast, Kelli.
Thanks a lot, Tim. It's my pleasure to be back involved with the Huffines Institute once again.
Well, we're so glad to have you back on the air with us with a podcast. I want to tell the audience a little bit about why we're interviewing you today. As I indicated, Kelli got both her bachelor's degree and her master's degree from here in Texas A&M. She finished up her master's degree in sports physiology in 2016. While she was here, not only did she work at the Huffines Institute, but she also was a strength coach for the Texas A&M different club teams, and she was a personal trainer at our recreation center. She went on to work for Michael Johnson Performance up in Dallas, where she played a large number of roles. She was a performance specialist, internship coordinator, education coordinator, and performance extern while she was there. She then wound up being the education coordinator in China for Michael Johnson Performance, which we're going to talk about. She is currently employed as a sports performance specialist in the Huffines Sports Medicine and Performance Center in Colorado Springs, Colorado. She has a wide variety of certifications and other credentials that help her do her job. She is a certified strength and conditioning specialist through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. She is a USA weightlifting level 1 sports performance coach, and she's a certified personal trainer through the American College of Sports Medicine. And so, Kelli, I am pleased to have you back on the podcast, and welcome again to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's almost kind of dreamy becoming in the hot seat when before I was in the producer seat. So, wow, who would have known after all these years?
Yeah. So I want to, the purpose of our talk today is I'd like for you to share with the audience a bit of your journey, because we have a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are at an early point in their careers, and maybe they don't know what to do or how to get there. And so I think your journey is an example of a lot of hard work and taking the opportunities that come to you. And so when you left here, you went and you did some work with Michael Johnson Performance Center. Tell us a little bit about that work and give us an idea about what it led to.
Of course. So at first I was an extern, which is a little bit more of a glorified internship role where it's a volunteer position, sometime working 12 to 14-hour days, very hardcore, which is how the strength and conditioning profession typically is. If you can last through and endure those long hours, you can endure anything as a strength and conditioning coach. So after that concluded for 12 weeks, at the end of the summer, I was hired on as a part-timer. And that typically also happens in the sports performance world. You don't immediately get a full-time position right out of college or right out of an internship or externship. So I had to kind of work for it and earn my role as finally a full-time sports performance specialist. And they hired me on full-time because they needed me to work more hours as helping out with our certified next gen development specialist certification that Michael Johnson Performance rolled out in 2017 as an educational product. So, which is pretty interesting. We had Michael Johnson Performance had training products and sports medicine services in the form of training athletes and then rehabilitating athletes, as well as some general population. But we rolled out with an educational product where people came to us to learn the Michael Johnson system and techniques in order to take those tools and use it on their athletes elsewhere. So I was hired on full time to assist with going over to China and teaching these certification courses periodically. About every other month, I would go out to China for 10 days as an assistant to our vice president, Lance Walker, who created the certification product. And I would help him for 10 straight days certifying Chinese professionals in the field about Michael Johnson performances, methods, and system for training athletes as well as youth athletes. Also, they hired me on full time because they needed me to help out with a special collegiate team called TCS, which stands for the Complete Showcase. And this is a group of young men right out of high school. It's their first year in college, and they're full time baseball athlete where they're competing against community colleges and junior colleges, as well as they're a part time student at a local junior college. And it was really a developmental program, and they trained with us for 5 days a week, both seasons, in season and out of season, which is a lot of time given for a private sector gym like Michael Johnson Performance. So they needed a little bit of extra time for me and hired me full time to help out with those programs and those products. So that is kind of how it all got kicked off. And from there, I took our certification and educational product and I integrated it into our internship program and our externship program at Michael Johnson Performance. It just so happened to be a 12-week internship or externship, depending on your graduate status. And there just so happened to be 12 educational modules within the certification course. So I felt like the curriculum went well with the duration of the internship. So I was granted the coordinator position and I revamped our internship process and curriculum at Michael Johnson Performance. I met a lot of great people. And in fact, I even met my now current fiance that I accepted as an intern. There was no funny business that happened during his role. He was a very responsible and respectable guy. But following, we became friends, and then more than that. So, really, a lot of awesome stuff happening with that internship program. That was really something I was proud of.
So let's loop back a little bit. What you said about going to China every month or so. Uh, First of all, do you speak Chinese or Mandarin?
I do know a few bits and pieces, but it wasn't gained prior to the China experience. The China experience gave me that knowledge. And it was because some of my translators would teach me stuff, and I'm always willing to learn something new every day. And I would use that. And I started to realize that sometimes people shy away from using the native language. You know, they're worried they're going to mess it up, or it's going to maybe even offend someone that someone else that speaks a different language is trying to speak their language. But I really found out that they encourage it and it makes them feel more comfortable. So I really tried to start using some of that language, especially when communicating with our attendees, those coaches, those professionals that came to our courses. I had to learn how to count in Chinese because a lot of coaching is how many reps and sets, 3, 2, 1, go. So I had to learn, first of all, how to count. That was a big deal. And then, of course, how to say some food in Chinese, because you definitely want to be able to communicate that you want some of, some chicken or some vegetables at the restaurant.
So I know a lot of people that would have been really intimidated in that kind of situation. How did you overcome maybe the anxiety of being so far away from home and dealing with that kind of thing?
Well, I took some advice from my mother, who told me years ago. Actually, I was a little bit anxious coming and speaking to you for the first time and seeing how I could get involved with the Institute. And something that I'll forever remember her saying is, Kelly, just remember how passionate you are. Use that passion for your energy and confidence around anyone. And so I kind of used that as, what is my purpose and what is my passion in life? Well, I believe my purpose is to love others through training and through educating them. And my passion is doing that and living out that purpose in a fun and strategic manner also. And so I really just applied that passion and my purpose in focusing in on how I should behave and what am I here for. And it really helped dissipate that anxiety, as well as, because I'm a into sports performance, something that's really awesome about sport is it brings the world together. So I knew that what I was teaching is a common ground that everyone can follow, no matter if you're Chinese, American, Mexican, Canadian. We all have a common ground with sport and physical activity because we're all humans. We were all born to move. So that's kind of how I dissipated that anxiety and really pushed through and did my best.
So you must have done a really good job because they made you full-time education coordinator in China, which meant that you had to move to China. And so share with the audience a little bit about that process of moving and working in China, and I won't steal any of your thunder here, but tell us about moving back and when that happened and the things that happened to make you come back to the United States.
Right. So the first trip I made out to China was in November of 2017 as the assistant. And made multiple trips about every other month. And around May of 2019, the vice president, Lance Walker, sat me down and told me that we want to do this full time out in China. We want to roll out more courses more often, and you're the girl for the job. And I want you to go out there solo and manage yourself. And so I thought long and hard and prayed about it. And I felt like I was the girl for the job. No one else could do it. So I accepted the role. And in July, I moved out to Beijing, China, in the southern portion of Beijing. Beijing is huge. And so that was a process on its own. So something that the folks should know is there is no social media or networks in China. It's blocked by the government. So communication to others is difficult. I had to get a Chinese phone number. I had to kind of jailbreak my phone so that it could function both as an American phone and a Chinese phone. I had to download special apps to bypass the strict restrictions on cyberspace that the Chinese government has so that I could still communicate with people, even down to Google is not accessible in China. So my work email was Gmail. So that caused problems and issues with sending emails, sending videos, photos, documents, and things. Had to open a Chinese bank account, had to have translators with me to help this process along. There was many difficulties. And when I actually got to China, I looked for myself an apartment. So I just stayed with my translator for a couple days before I could find and move into an apartment. Then the getting accustomed to the office life. I actually had an office in Beijing. I only could speak with about 2 people out of 20 people in the office building. And my office was located with our partner, Saipu University, which is pretty interesting. We ran courses out of this Saipu University. They had 8 different campuses around Beijing. So a very accomplished and successful university, and it's a fitness university. Never seen anything like it. You can go to school for 3 up to 12 months and become everything fitness. You can take electives in boxing or yoga. You can kind of gear it towards what you want to specialize in, but they give you the basic knowledge and foundation of how to train individuals to increase their fitness level. So we ran educational courses from their university in a very nice facility that was built like a sports performance facility, complete with turf, classrooms, and a weight room. So that was pretty interesting, but it was nice having my own office and somewhere that I could train myself and stay physically active while working. Then the university was kind enough to give me a cafeteria card. So they kind of used that as a thank you and compensation for me. So I got to go and dine in the university dining hall with all of the students on a day-to-day basis. And I was the only American, Caucasian, blonde hair, blue eyed female anywhere to be seen in a 50-mile radius probably. So I got a little bit of attention from folks in the cafeteria. It was a wild ride getting started. I was supported greatly by a lot of my translators. They really helped me out a lot. They become your second voice. So it immediately established a relationship, and I never was treated incorrectly in China. Not ever, not once. So I really trusted these folks. So as time went on, and I
So,
would,
I want to interrupt here.
yeah,
So,
go ahead.
I know the translators are going to be an important player in the story as we go forward. How'd you find your translators?
Well, they were provided by the university, and then we also had another partner who was, they helped to run fitness, nutrition, and strength and conditioning courses called Just Play, located in Shanghai. So we had Saipu University and Just Play, Beijing and Shanghai. Well, those companies provided the translators. But the thing is, I had two different sets. The university translators, they were knowledgeable in physiology, rehabilitation, and sports performance techniques. The translators from Just Play, they were actually professional translators. They went to school to become a translator. So sometimes I had to really explain a lot of different concepts to them so that they could relay those to professionals and coaches that speak the same language, the same terminology and exercise phys that I do. So that was kind of interesting, but the companies provided the translators and they ended up being very high quality.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So this is July of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand, you had planned to come back to the States in December.
Yes.
So
So
pick up the story from there.
yeah, so of course it's Christmas time and I want to have a break and go visit my family after 6 months in China alone, solo dolo. And so I fly back home to take a little Christmas break. Also, around New Year's, the Chinese celebrate their biggest holiday of the year, which is the Lunar New Year. It happens different every year, but it was going to be in early to mid January in 2020. So my courses went on pause for my holiday break and for the Chinese holiday break. So in January, when it's about time to book the flight to go back to China and start scheduling out the courses, I get word from my translators, Kelli, do not come back to China. Do not allow MJP to fly you back here. It is dangerous, unsafe. Sure enough, that's when the reports in the news started coming out about the coronavirus, this crazy virus that was discovered by some doctors in China. And so, of course, okay, maybe in a month it'll kind of dissipate out. It'll run its course. No, as we see, it did not run its course. And so the warning of my translators helped me and my company to decide whether to send me back or not. And then the final decision was made on February 4th that my international assignment was canceled. All the while, I still had the apartment and the office and my cafeteria card back in China. And so, as well as a bank account open. So that was a little bit interesting figuring out how to communicate remotely with my landlord who doesn't speak English on how to pack up and ship out my belongings all the way back to America. So with the help of my translators, they helped him out in packaging that up and getting that back to me. But of course, when it landed at my parents' house, we kept that box on the back porch for a solid 14 days because we did not know what all was going on with the virus or how contagious or the mode of transference of that virus. So that was a little bit of a wild ride. Those of us, yes, we all had uncertainty during the coronavirus time, but my uncertainty was, in my opinion, elevated a little bit because I was split in two places. One of the places being where the virus came from. So pretty interesting story on that one.
Well, and I was going to, I guess, prompt you a little bit because the virus broke out in Wuhan.
That's right.
And depending on what you read, it sounds like just different dates. But so you had a connection with Wuhan.
Yeah, so actually, with the company Just Play that's located in Shanghai, we took a little field trip down to Wuhan to do a marketing event at a different fitness university that's down in Wuhan. We did that on December 10th, and we stayed for a day or two in Wuhan, traveled on high-speed trains all throughout China. Most train rides to major cities from Beijing or Shanghai is about 5 hours. So with the public on a train coming from Wuhan back to Shanghai and Beijing, with the coronavirus lingering about. Yes, so I was in Wuhan, and then maybe a week later, 2 weeks later, is when there was the first report from a doctor about recognizing there was an odd cold that was he was seeing in some of his patients. So I could have been I could have been in Wuhan when the virus broke out originally.
But you didn't get COVID during that time.
Not to my knowledge, I didn't. I could be highly resistant against it, but I have a suspicion that I did get some type of bad flu in the DFW airport while I was flying out to Colorado for this interview for now my current position. I came down with a terrible flu, never had the flu in my whole life, and it was there for 11 to 14 days and was really bad. I lost about 15 pounds during that time. So who knows? But pretty crazy, wild ride. I do not know of anyone that was my translators or friends over in China that did get the coronavirus. They stayed pretty low and followed the recommendations well. So everyone was safe that I knew from back in China.
Excellent. So talk to us a little bit about your current position. You're at a sports facility that is kind of a hybrid. It's kind of like the Huffines, but yet taken to a whole nother magnitude and level. And so tell us a little bit about the Hybel Center and what you do there and what y'all are trying to accomplish.
Yes. So we are in a very special center. And it's called a center because there's so many things happening. A lot of collaborative things are going on here. So this building that is officially named the William J. Hybel Center of Sports Medicine and Human Performance, the namesake William J. Hybel was a very active member within Colorado, and he was actually a senator, I believe, or maybe a congressman. Pardon me if I can't remember exactly, but he's done a lot of work for the state of Colorado as well as the United States. And so he's our namesake. And he was also within sports. I believe that he was a professional athlete at one point in his life. He's a very accomplished individual. Well, this was opened through a partnership of Centura Health, which is a hospital system located in Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado, and the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. Specifically, the health sciences, human physiology, nutrition departments are housed in this building along with Centura Health Hospital. And specifically, it's the sports medicine department of Centura Health. So we have a lot of orthopedic surgeons, as well as physical therapists and athletic trainers that work here. And for the first time ever, Centura opened up its sports performance department. And I am one out of three first ever employees in the Centura sports performance department. And what's going on here is a very unique collaboration between research, academia, our sports medicine medical staff, and then practical hands-on application within the medical and sports performance world that's feeding in from the research and the academics that's going on in the floors above us with UCCS. So all the time you see biomechanical professors utilizing our motion capture system down in our facility, or you see strength and conditioning instructors that are teaching students about special techniques within the strength and conditioning field. They're showing our pieces of equipment and how to utilize them. So in a way, our Hybel Center is a big laboratory that meets and blends practitioners and researchers and students and doctors all under one roof. It's quite incredible what's going on here. Even it hasn't even been opened up a year, and we're seeing so much collaboration. One final thing I'll say is not only Do we collaborate and get help from our health sciences or our nutrition or physiology departments, but as well as the UCCS engineering department? Right now, downstairs, they are actually testing out a high-speed, wide treadmill, that the purpose of the treadmill is for athletes with physical disabilities, whether they be in a wheelchair or above the knee amputee, can utilize this very wide, high-speed treadmill safely, because the UCCS engineers are creating a harness system so that if the wheelchair or if something happens to the athlete where the wheelchair rolls out from under them or they lose their balance, they're then suspended in the air safely while the treadmill could still be going. So that is also very cool that we're getting to even get to use the engineering department to build a one of its kind, nowhere else in the world, harness system for athletes with physical disabilities.
Well, and that is pretty cool. And the stuff that's going on is pretty cool. And the fact that there are so many of the Olympic training centers that are really close to you guys, I'm sure that you guys see quite a few elite athletes there as well.
Yes. In fact, the Hibble Center was one out of 4 projects called the City of Champions projects. So the city of Colorado Springs came out with an initiative and got a lot of funding to develop multiple different facilities and centers to, one, help outreach to the community, to help the locals improve their lives, and number 2, to outreach people outside of the community and draw in some extra revenue into the community to build the economy. So we are one of those special 4 centers, right in line with, just to give you an example, another one of the City of Champions projects is the Olympic and Paralympic Museum that just recently opened up. So that's kind of the level that we're sitting at with a very amazing museum here in the Olympic City.
Well, that's really cool, Kelly.
Yes,
And
and
I'm so
yeah,
excited
and
for you.
one thing I want to mention, a special thing, a few athletes that we have in here currently that are USA, Team USA, is we have some USA wrestlers that are currently training in our facility. And we get also those Paralympic athletes, because one of the centers of distinction of our facility is to help individuals with physical disabilities that are athletes. So we've designed a lot of parts of our facility to suit the needs and the accessibility needs of these athletes.
Well, that's really cool. Sounds like a lot of cool things going on. And thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. We're running a little short on time, and you know better than anybody else. We always, at the end of our podcast, ask our speakers to give us a take-home message. If there's one thing that you want the listeners of this podcast or the viewers of this podcast to remember, what is that? What do you want them to know? What's your take-home message?
Wow, there's two different ones. I'm going to have to select one. I'll probably go with the most easy. So I'm actually going to credit our friend David Epstein and his book, The Range, his new book that he came out with. And I think it is very important as an individual to not narrow your scope, but widen your scope and have many tools in your toolbox. And one thing that I would describe to the Chinese students that I had is we don't want to be so narrow-minded, and we cannot live in the world of black and white, especially when you're dealing with humans, because we're complex individuals that adapt and adjust at different rates physiologically and mentally and emotionally. So instead of black and white answers for everything, there's no absolutes, and we must become masters of that gray area, that area that's a question mark. We have to take all the tools in our toolbox, the range of knowledge that we have. We must select the best tools based off of the situation. It's going to be different for every individual and every situation. So we must become masters of the gray. There's no black and white answers or absolutes in life.
Thank you, Kelly. That was a great take-home message, especially in our world nowadays. So again, thank you. And thank you for your time. It's great to see you. And I know many people in the audience will be glad to see how you've been faring, since you always used to sign off our podcast. And I'd like to thank all of you that have listened and are streaming today, for being with us and taking the time to be with us. We hope you enjoy these podcasts. And as we always say, we hope that during the next time, until we see you again, that you stay active and healthy. I think we are ready to go. Okay.